Before the sun touches the ancient walls, before the calls to prayer and the ringing of bells weave through narrow streets, there is a moment when Jerusalem holds its breath. If you want to walk through this sacred Friday with us, to feel the stones beneath your feet and the prayers in the air, consider joining this journey. Subscribe now and let these streets become yours. You arrive at Jaffa Gate as the first light breaks over the Judean hills, spilling pale gold across limestone that has stood for millennia. The gate yawns open, worn smooth by countless hands, countless footsteps, the weight of pilgrims and merchants and seekers who have passed through this threshold for generations. The air is cool, almost sharp, carrying the faint scent of baking bread from somewhere deep within the Armenian quarter, mingling with the earthy smell of old stones still damp with night dew. You step through and the city swallows you whole. The streets are waking slowly, vendors setting out their wares along the narrow corridors of the souk, rolling up metal shutters with a clatter that echoes off the vaulted ceilings above. Pyramids of spices appear in shallow wooden bins, crimson sumac and golden turmeric catching the slanting light. A shopkeeper arranges hanging lamps, their colored glass glowing like jewels when the sun finds them. You can hear voices, low and unhurried, speaking Arabic, Armenian, Hebrew, languages layered like the stones themselves. Someone is brewing coffee, the sharp bitter aroma drifting through an open doorway. Somewhere behind you, a cat slips between shadows, gray as smoke. You follow the flow of early pilgrims moving deeper into the old city, their footsteps muffled on the ancient cobblestones, worn concave by centuries of processions. The alleyways narrow, walls closing in on either side until you can almost touch both at once, and above you the sky is reduced to a ribbon of blue between the rooflines. Laundry hangs from iron balconies, white and pale blue sheets stirring in the morning breeze. You pass under archways so old their origins have been lost to time, stones fitted together without mortar, each one bearing the fingerprints of Byzantine builders, Crusader masons, Ottoman craftsmen. The city is a palimpsest, each era writing over the last but never quite erasing what came before. The bells begin just after dawn, a single toll from somewhere high and distant, perhaps from the Church of the Redeemer, its gray spire visible above the tangle of rooftops. Then another answers, deeper, fuller, from the direction of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And then more, until the air itself seems to vibrate with bronze voices calling the faithful to morning prayer. You feel it in your chest, that deep resonance, as if the city's heartbeat has suddenly become audible. The pilgrims around you pause, some crossing themselves, others simply stopping to listen, heads tilted toward the sound. You turn onto Via Dolorosa, the Way of Sorrows, a street so narrow that when two groups of pilgrims meet they must press against the walls to let each other pass. The stones here are darker, polished by touch, and you can see where generations have run their hands along the walls, where fingers have traced the stations marked by small chapels and bronze plaques. The first station stands just inside the gate of what was once the Antonia fortress, and already a small group has gathered there, heads bowed. You hear Latin, whispered prayers, the rustle of rosary beads. A priest in a brown robe stands with them, his voice low and steady, and though you cannot make out the words you understand the weight of them. The morning grows warmer as you climb, the sun now high enough to pour light straight down into the street, turning everything to gold and shadow. The stones radiate heat and you can smell it, that particular scent of sun on limestone, dry and faintly dusty. At the second station, a chapel built into a wall, a nun kneels on the steps, her habit black against the pale stone. She does not look up as pilgrims pass, her lips moving in silent prayer. You notice her hands, weathered and strong, gripping a worn prayer book. There is something profound in her stillness, in the way she has chosen this spot, this moment, to offer her devotion. The street bends and rises, and you follow it past shops selling olive wood crosses and icons painted on wood, past a spice merchant whose doorway exhales cinnamon and cloves. A boy carries a tray of bread on his head, balancing it with one hand, navigating the crowd with the ease of someone who has walked these streets every day of his life. You step aside to let him pass and he nods, quick and courteous, before disappearing around a corner. The via continues, station after station, each one marked by prayer, by the presence of pilgrims who have come from every corner of the world to walk this path. At the third station, where tradition holds that Christ fell for the first time, a group of Korean pilgrims has gathered, their voices rising in a hymn you do not recognize but whose melody is unmistakably sorrowful. They sing in unison, their faces lifted toward the chapel's small window, and for a moment everything else fades. The shopkeepers pause, the passing travelers stop, and the street becomes a vessel for that single sustained note of devotion. When they finish, the silence that follows feels sacred, as if the stones themselves have absorbed the prayer and are holding it. You continue upward, the climb steeper now, your breath coming a little harder. The fourth station, the fifth, each one a pause in the journey, a moment to reflect on suffering and endurance and the weight of faith. At the sixth station, a woman reaches out to touch the wall where tradition says Veronica wiped the face of Christ, and her fingers linger there, tracing the stone as if seeking some connection across the centuries. You notice tears on her cheeks, though she makes no sound. Beside her, a man places his hand on her shoulder, a simple gesture of comfort, and they stand together in silence. The street narrows again, darkens as you pass through a section covered by buildings overhead, creating a tunnel of stone. Here the air is cooler, almost cold, and the light filters through in shafts, illuminating dust motes that drift like snow. You can hear your own footsteps now, distinct and clear, and the sound seems to echo not just off the walls but through time itself, as if you are walking in the footsteps of all who have made this journey before you. A Greek Orthodox priest passes, his black robe sweeping the ground, his beard long and silver. He nods to you, a small acknowledgement, and you nod back. The seventh station marks another fall, and here an Ethiopian monk stands alone, his prayer shawl wrapped around his shoulders, his voice rising in a language you do not understand but whose cadence is unmistakably ancient. He rocks slightly as he prays, back and forth, and his hands are raised, palms up, as if holding something invisible and infinitely precious. You do not interrupt, do not even pause long, but the image stays with you as you move on, that solitary figure pouring his soul into the morning air. As you approach the eighth station, you hear a new sound rising above the bells and the murmur of prayers, a sound that seems to come from the very heart of the city. It begins as a low hum, then builds, gaining strength and clarity until you recognize it as the call to prayer, the adhan, rising from the minarets of Al-Aqsa Mosque on the Temple Mount. The voice is clear and powerful, carrying across the rooftops and through the streets, and all around you people begin to respond. Muslim shopkeepers roll down their shutters, pilgrims on the Via Dolorosa step aside, and the city shifts, its rhythm changing as Friday noon approaches. You can feel it, the way the old city transforms as the call continues, the words woven through with a devotion that transcends language. Allahu Akbar, the voice proclaims, and the phrases that follow, melodic and ancient, seem to settle over Jerusalem like a benediction. The bells have fallen silent now, as if in deference, and even the pilgrims on the Via Dolorosa pause their procession, recognizing this as a moment that belongs to another tradition, another way of seeking the divine. You make your way toward the Haram al-Sharif, the noble sanctuary, though you know you cannot enter, for this space is reserved for Muslim worshippers. Instead, you find a place near Damascus Gate, where you can see the faithful streaming toward the entrance, men in white skullcaps and long robes, women in hijabs of every color, families walking together, grandparents holding the hands of children who skip and chatter until they reach the gates and then grow still, understanding the gravity of where they are going. You watch as they remove their shoes as they pass through the gates and begin the climb toward the golden dome of the rock, its tiles brilliant in the midday sun, and the silver dome of Al-Aqsa beyond. You cannot see the prayers that will unfold there, but you can imagine them, thousands of worshippers standing shoulder to shoulder in neat rows, facing Mecca, their voices united in the Jumu'ah prayer that marks this sacred day. You have heard it before, that moment when 1,000 voices speak as one, reciting verses from the Quran, the words rising and falling like waves, and the silence between phrases so complete it seems the world itself is listening. Down in the old city, the squares have emptied, shops closed for the noon hour. You stand in the shadow of a stone arch and simply listen. The adhan concludes, its final notes hanging in the air before fading, and then there is only the sound of wind moving through the streets, stirring the flags and banners that hang from windows, and the distant murmur of prayer from the mount above. You realize you are holding your breath and you let it out slowly, aware that you are witnessing something profound, a moment when an entire city pauses to turn its face toward the divine. After some time, you return to the Via Dolorosa, rejoining the pilgrims who have been waiting patiently, and the procession resumes. The ninth station is just ahead, marking yet another fall, and then you are climbing the final steps toward Calvary, toward Golgotha, toward the place where the journey ends. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre rises before you, its facade worn and patched, a confusion of architectural styles reflecting centuries of rebuilding, destruction, and restoration. The entrance is modest, almost humble, and you have to bow your head to pass through the low doorway, a gesture that feels appropriate, as if the church itself is teaching you reverence. Inside, the air is thick with incense, frankincense and myrrh burning in silver censers that swing from chains, the smoke rising in slow spirals toward the dome high above. The space is dim after the brightness outside, lit by hundreds of candles, their flames reflected in the gold and silver of icons that line the walls. The stone floor is uneven, worn smooth by pilgrims, and everywhere you look there are people kneeling, praying, reaching out to touch the walls and altars. You hear Greek, Russian, Italian, Spanish, Tagalog, a symphony of languages united by a common purpose. You move toward the stone of unction, a low slab of reddish marble where tradition holds that the body of Christ was prepared for burial. Pilgrims kneel around it, some laying out cloths and icons to press against its surface, others simply touching it with their hands before bringing those hands to their lips, their foreheads, their hearts. An elderly woman weeps silently, her shoulders shaking, and a younger woman beside her, perhaps her daughter, wraps an arm around her and holds her close. You feel the intimacy of this grief, the way it has traveled across oceans and years to find expression here in this sacred space. The Franciscan procession begins in the late afternoon, as the sun begins its descent toward the western hills. You hear them first, the sound of voices raised in hymn, approaching from somewhere deep within the church. Then they appear, a line of brown-robed friars carrying crosses and lanterns, their faces solemn, their steps measured and deliberate. They process through the church, pausing at each station, and the pilgrims press back against the walls to let them pass. The hymns are in Latin, ancient and haunting, and the acoustics of the church amplify them, sending the notes soaring up into the dome where they seem to linger. You follow the procession as it winds through the church, past the Greek Orthodox chapel with its iconostasis gleaming in candlelight, past the Armenian chapel where priests in pointed hoods stand vigil, past the Syrian Orthodox altar and the Coptic chapel, each one a different expression of the same faith, each one guarding its portion of this holy ground. The church is a microcosm of Christianity itself, divided and yet united, separate and yet sharing this single space, this single story. The procession culminates at the edicule, the small structure built over what is believed to be the tomb itself. The line to enter is long, pilgrims waiting patiently for their turn to step inside, to kneel in that tiny space and offer their prayers. You wait with them, and as you move slowly forward you notice the details: the blackened marble from centuries of candle smoke, the silver star marking the spot, the worn threshold where millions of pilgrims have entered. When your turn comes, you step inside and the world contracts to this single moment, this single breath, this encounter with mystery. Outside, the sky is beginning to change, the harsh white light of afternoon softening to amber and rose. You leave the Church of the Holy Sepulchre and make your way through the narrow streets of the Christian quarter, past the Lutheran Church of the Redeemer and the Church of St. John the Baptist, past shops selling icons and rosaries and bottles of holy water from the Jordan River. The bells are ringing again now, calling the faithful to evening prayer, and their sound weaves through the city like a thread stitching earth to heaven. You turn toward the Jewish quarter, descending the broad steps that lead down from the Cardo, the ancient Roman street now partially excavated and open to the sky. The stones here are newer, rebuilt after the devastation of wars past, but they sit atop foundations that go back thousands of years, back to the time of the Second Temple, back to kings and prophets and the long unbroken thread of Jewish presence in this city. You pass the Herva Synagogue, its white dome rising gracefully above the surrounding buildings, and hear the sound of voices singing, a joyful melody marking the approach of Shabbat. The Western Wall Plaza opens before you as you descend the final steps, and you stop, struck by the sight. The massive stones of the wall rise up, each one weighing tons, fitted together with such precision that not even a blade of grass can grow between them. The upper courses are lighter, Ottoman era additions, but the lower stones, the ancient ones, are darker, massive, bearing the weight of centuries. The plaza is filling with worshippers, men in black coats and fur hats streaming toward the left side, women in modest dresses and scarves moving to the right, families arriving together before separating to pray. You watch as the sun drops lower, its light turning the Jerusalem stone to honey and gold. At the wall itself, people press close, some praying from prayer books, others simply standing with their hands on the stone, their foreheads resting against its cool surface. You see young men swaying as they pray, their voices rising in Hebrew chants, old men wrapped in prayer shawls, talith, with fringes that sway as they move. On the women's side, a grandmother lights Shabbat candles in a small niche, her hands circling the flames 3 times before covering her eyes to recite the blessing, and around her other women do the same, creating a constellation of small lights. The sound of prayer grows, individual voices joining into a collective murmur that rises from the plaza like incense. You hear the ancient words, Shema Yisrael, Hear O Israel, the declaration of faith that has sustained a people through exile and return, through destruction and rebuilding. You hear other prayers too, personal supplications, words of thanksgiving, voices breaking with emotion. People are placing small folded notes into the crevices between the stones, prayers written on paper, hopes and fears and dreams entrusted to this place. The cracks are full of them, thousands upon thousands, a physical manifestation of longing. As the sun touches the horizon, a hush falls over the plaza. The moment of transition has arrived, the threshold between the workday week and the holy day of rest. You see men checking their watches, families gathering, mothers smoothing their children's hair. And then it begins, the welcoming of Shabbat, voices raised in the song L'Chadodi, Come My Beloved, a hymn that personifies the Sabbath as a bride. The melody is joyful, almost exuberant, and people sway as they sing, some linking arms, others clapping in rhythm. At the final verse, everyone turns to face away from the wall, toward the entrance to the plaza, symbolically greeting the Sabbath as she arrives. The sun slips below the hills and 3 stars appear in the darkening sky. Shabbat has begun. You feel the change, the way the city seems to exhale, to settle into a different rhythm. The shops in the Jewish quarter have closed, the streets quieter now, families making their way home to candlelit tables and challah bread and wine blessed with ancient words. You hear singing from open windows, the Shalom Aleichem welcoming the Sabbath angels, and the sound is warm, intimate, full of peace. You leave the plaza as night falls, climbing back up through the Jewish quarter, then cutting through the Armenian quarter toward Zion Gate. The streets are narrow here, the walls high, and the darkness is broken only by the occasional street lamp or the light spilling from a window. You pass the Cathedral of St. James, its compound closed for the night, and hear the faint sound of evening prayers from within, Armenian liturgy sung in a language that predates the Muslim and Christian divisions, a language that has carried faith through centuries of diaspora. You emerge at Mount Zion, the wind stronger here on the heights, carrying the scent of pine and dust. Below you the old city spreads out, a jumble of domes and rooftops and minarets, all of it bathed in the blue light of evening. You can see the Dome of the Rock, its gold surface now reflecting the moon, and beside it the gray dome of Al-Aqsa. You can see the Church of the Holy Sepulchre marked by its twin domes and the Western Wall Plaza, still lit, still occupied by those who have chosen to extend their prayers into the night. Lights are coming on across the city in the Muslim quarter and the Christian quarter and the Jewish quarter and the Armenian quarter, each one a small declaration of presence, of continuity, of the determination to remain. You stand there for a long time, listening to the sounds that rise from the city below. Bells toll from the Church of the Dormition, marking the hour. From somewhere in the Muslim quarter, you hear a voice raised in prayer, perhaps a private devotion, the words carried on the wind. From the Jewish quarter, the faint sound of singing, a Shabbat table gathering its family. And beneath it all, the sound that never ceases, the sound that defines Jerusalem more than any other, footsteps on stone. Pilgrims walking, worshippers arriving, residents going about their lives, each step adding to the countless millions that have marked these streets, each one a prayer in itself. You descend back into the old city, re-entering through Zion Gate, its outer wall still pockmarked with bullet holes from battles fought decades ago, scars that have been left unrepaired as a reminder, as a warning, as a testament. The streets are quieter now, many shops closed but not deserted. You pass a group of young Jewish men, students perhaps, walking together toward the Western Wall for evening prayers, their voices animated, laughing about something. You pass a priest, orthodox by his black robe and cylindrical hat, walking alone, a prayer rope in his hands, his lips moving silently. You pass a Muslim family, the father carrying a sleeping child, the mother holding the hand of an older daughter, making their way home after iftar, the breaking of the fast, though Ramadan is not now but its rhythms are remembered. The Via Dolorosa is nearly empty, just a few pilgrims making a late evening walk, their flashlights creating pools of light on the ancient stones. You follow it down, retracing the path you walked this morning, and it feels different now, the station's silent, the chapel's locked. But the stones remember, you think. The stones hold every prayer, every tear, every moment of devotion that has been offered here. You place your hand on the wall as you walk, feeling the coolness of limestone, the slight roughness of its surface, and you think about all the hands that have touched this same stone, all the seekers and believers and doubters who have walked this same path. You emerge near the Church of the Holy Sepulchre again, and you see that its doors are still open, candlelight spilling out into the courtyard. Inside, monks are chanting, their voices low and rhythmic, and the smell of incense drifts out into the night. You do not enter, but you stand there for a moment, listening, absorbing the peace that emanates from that space. A cat walks past, unconcerned, and disappears into the shadows. Somewhere a baby cries and a mother's voice soothes it. Life continues, mundane and sacred woven together, as they always have been in this city. You make your way toward Damascus Gate, the main entrance to the Muslim quarter, the most vibrant and crowded of the four quarters. Even now, late in the evening, the area near the gate is busy, vendors selling juice and falafel, families sitting on the steps eating ice cream, young men gathered in groups talking and smoking. The gate itself is magnificent, Ottoman architecture at its finest, with crenellated towers and an arched entrance large enough for cars to pass through, though only pedestrians use it now. You climb the stairs beside the gate and look back at the old city, its walls lit by spotlights, its presence massive and immovable. Friday in Jerusalem. You have walked through its hours from dawn to dark, from one tradition to another, and you have felt the weight of devotion, the power of prayer, the way this small city holds the hopes and fears of millions. You have heard bells and the call to prayer and Hebrew chants, you have smelled incense and spices and baking bread, you have touched stones worn smooth by pilgrims and walls that have witnessed empires rise and fall. And through it all, you have sensed something that transcends religion or politics or history, something that might simply be called the sacred, that quality that makes a place a portal, a threshold between the ordinary and the eternal. The night deepens and the city grows quieter still. You walk back through the narrow streets one last time, past shuttered shops and closed doors, past windows where families gather and where solitary figures sit reading or praying or simply thinking. You pass a final time through the souk, now empty and echoing, your footsteps loud in the vaulted corridor. You pass the spice merchant's shop, dark now, but the scent of cinnamon and cloves still lingers. You pass the lamp seller's stall, the colored glass dim without the sun to illuminate it. You pass through the gate and out into the modern city beyond, where cars rush past and streetlights glare and the 21st century reasserts itself. But something stays with you. The memory of those stones, those prayers, those moments of silent communion with something greater than yourself. The memory of the bells and the call to prayer, of candlelight and moonlight on ancient walls, of pilgrims from every nation walking the same paths, seeking the same thing even if they call it by different names. Jerusalem on a Friday, where three faiths meet and sometimes clash but also, in moments like these, coexist, each one adding its voice to the symphony, each one a thread in the tapestry. If this walk through Jerusalem's sacred Friday has moved you, if you felt the stones beneath your feet and heard the prayers in the air, then walk with us again. Subscribe to join us on more journeys through places where faith and history converge, where the divine feels close enough to touch. These streets have more stories to tell and we are here to share them with you. Subscribe now and let the journey continue.